Moving on to item 2.5, Vice Chancellor Troy.
Yes, thank you, President Himmelstein, Chancellor Harris, and board members. Today we will talk about the annual district obligation for full-time faculty hires. By November 20th of each year, our regulations provide that the Board of Governors must determine whether adequate cost of living funds, growth funds, and funds for other core programs have been provided in the state budget to allow for either full or partial implementation of the increase in full-time faculty hiring obligations. Generally, under these requirements, each fall districts must employ a specified minimum number of full-time faculty. And in years in which the board determines that there are adequate funds for the full implementation, the district's obligation number increases approximately by the percentage increase in credit instruction. Since, due to our fiscal circumstances over the recent years, the board has found that there have been inadequate resources since the fall of 2008 through last year. In terms of analyzing this year's situation, you'll note that our agenda discussed two potential scenarios, since it had to be written prior to the results of Proposition 30. Fortunately, we can dispense with scenario 2, which spoke about the failure of Prop 30. With the passage of Prop 30, though, I note that the regulations talk again about COLA, growth, and restoration of core programs or categorical programs. Even under the positive scenario that we received last week from the voters, we have no cost of living. We have only $50 million in growth fundings for this year, and there is no restoration of the deep categorical program reductions we withstood in the 2009-10 year. So with that, I would make a recommendation to the board that there are inadequate resources this year to increase the full-time faculty bond obligation for next fall. In addition to considering those three elements, I would ask that the board also consider our recent fiscal history. Even with the $50 million in growth, we still have about $400 million in outstanding workload reductions that our system has absorbed. We have not had a COLA since the 2007-8 year. That represents a loss in purchasing power of 18 to 20% for our districts. As mentioned earlier, the categorical program hits we took in 2009-10 have not been restored. That's over $300 million in losses. Additionally, this is still a very complicated year for our districts. We're certainly very grateful that the voters are willing to approve Proposition 30 and provide some stabilizing resources for our system. But note that our districts have to internally borrow to get through the fiscal year with that, as the revenues from Prop 30 do not materialize automatically upon Election Day. They have to be collected in the Treasury. And as a result, the districts are not going to receive about 40% of their annual general fund this year until June. So it is certainly a potential that we could get to May revision, and Department of Finance would inform us that not all the funds are coming in as hoped. So it is still a precarious fiscal year for our districts, and given all that, I would recommend that the board find that there is not adequate resources to fully implement the FON. Should the board agree with that conclusion, I'd note that this does not mean there is no FON obligation in effect. It means that districts have two choices. They can meet their obligations by adhering to the number for the fall 2012 year, or by meeting the percentage of the same percentage of full-time to part-time instruction that they had year over year. I further note that we did have this discussion with Consultation Council, and I think I can fairly report that while there was some general discussion of how the FON works, that there was no direct contest of this recommendation.
Thank you. Member McDougall.
I'd like to move approval of the recommended action.
Okay.
Second.
Seconded by Member Baum. Motion made by Member McDougall. Comment, Member Belinsky.
Yeah, just a couple of questions, because I'm not that knowledgeable of how all this works. I've never sat down in the district. But in the two options of full-time positions versus percentage, how much difference in a college might there be between the two? If I'm making sense.
Yeah, I think the issue is, and the concern for districts could be that if you've been relying on the percentage, I mean, normally in years where we find that there are adequate resources, you don't have that percentage option. You simply have to increase the number. And
Say that again.
in years where we do find that there are adequate resources, there is no percentage option. You simply have your number you need to meet, and that goes up with the roughly the percentage increase in credit instruction. So where districts can get in trouble is if for year after year they're relying on that percentage.
Okay.
Yeah, and so they could be getting farther and farther away from reaching that number. So when we get to that year where the board finds there's adequate resources, they may have to catch up a lot of ground.
So if they're using the percentage rather than the full number, it's conceivable when, just to repeat what you said, because that's sort of what I heard, that there'd be a huge number that a district might have to hire to meet the number.
Yeah, but that's not the case in all districts, but there are certainly some districts who could find themselves in the need to hire a lot of full-time faculty in a short amount of time.
Thank you.
Other,
That needs to get out there to people.
other questions, comments?
I'd just like to add, you know, we're obviously needing to do some things that we would prefer not to do given the circumstances of the state budget and the economy in general. But I think we just continually have to remind ourselves that as we make these decisions, we're also cutting into the quality and delivery of instruction or services to students. So even though we have to make these decisions, I suppose, in a way that affects that, I think we have to keep in mind that there is a point where there's diminishing returns, and obviously the quality is affected. But it's just a comment that I think I needed to make just to kind of reinforce what it is that we're doing.
Okay, motion on the floor by Member McDougall, seconded by Member Baum to approve staff recommendation. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Vice Chancellor.
Thank you.